Good day, gentlemen. The title for today's video is actually not meant to be clickbait. It's probably going to be something like the worst thing that people tend to do in their interpersonal relationships, or the worst mistake that people tend to make from what I've observed on just kind of a consistent basis. And it's not clickbait because it actually is a very simple concept that a lot of people, including myself in the past, seem to have a really difficult time with. Probably most people out there, to be honest. And that is when you recognize that someone is not a positive part of your life, they really have no role to play that's healthy, or whatever good that they bring is greatly outweighed by the bad, regardless of whether they're related to you but have never really treated you like family, or they hang out with your group of friends and they act like they're your friend, but they're clearly not your friend based on the actions and choices that they've made in the past, or in terms of just a former relationship partner. Because honestly, if you are still dating or in a relationship, when that relationship ends, unless you have children, there's generally no real reason to remain friends with your ex. Unless you actually remain friends the whole time during your breakup, there's really no reason to stay friends with an ex. When you determine, based on whatever criteria that you set out, that someone is not really a positive force or factor in your life, in order to move on, in order to heal from whatever damage that person might have done in your life, you must kick them out of your life. You must move on from them and let go of that connection or relationship. And the reason why I say it seems to be the worst mistake that people make over and over again is you see people fighting all the time, staying in relationships with people that beat the crap out of you or that want to hurt you with an object, being friends with someone that lies to you all the time and calls you a bunch of names to try to make you feel bad on a constant basis. And I don't mean in terms of like good-natured heckling. I mean, it's clear that you don't like it and they continue to do it anyway. People that have no respect for you, that treat you poorly. Or, again, as I mentioned, family members who aren't really family members. They're just related to you. They've never treated you like family. They've never really been there for you in any way. They've always tried to run you down. Or, again, the negatives that they've brought into your life have pretty much consistently outweighed any positives. I'm not going to go as far as to suggest what criteria you should have, because it depends on the person, the nature of the relationship. Again, if it's someone that's your ex-partner, there's usually very little reason to stay friends at all. But if it's someone that actually has been a good family member, and then you have some sort of conflict, you have to decide how much you want to work through that conflict. I'm not suggesting that you don't try to salvage something that could still be healthy or positive in your life. I'm not saying that, well, this person did something I didn't like once, so I'm just cutting them out entirely. That only makes sense if you really had no connection or relationship with that person to begin with. But the process itself is up to you as an individual, in my view. I'm not suggesting what that process is or how high or low the bar is for you to decide that you're done with someone, considering the specific nature of the relationship with that person. You have to decide that for yourself. How much leeway you want to give that person, how much you want to work on that, whether there's still anything positive there. And then the parent-child relationship is unique in itself. So there, maybe you actually leave the door open, even if there is a great deal of conflict, but at the same time, you don't necessarily walk through that door, if that makes sense. But you have to decide for yourself. I can't even begin to suggest beyond that what the criteria should be, what it is that you should do in terms of deciding whether someone is not going to be a positive force or factor in your life anymore. What I'm saying is, once you make that decision, once you put it all together and make the realization that, okay, this person has no positive role to play in my life basically at all, or the negatives greatly outweigh the positives, there's really no reason for me to continue to associate with this person. I'm much better off not doing so. Once you reach that point, you don't continue to engage in conflict with that person. You don't continue to try to work things out. You don't continue to try to get that person to like you or make up for things, even if you were partly in the wrong at some point in the conflict. Once you decide that you're done, then you need to be done. So many people seem to not get this. They stay in these toxic relationships. They have people around them that act like they're your friends, and yet they have no friends because all the people around them are willing to betray them. You see people that continue to talk with their exes, and their ex goes off and dates someone else, and they feel bad about it, but they want to stay friends. All that is generally a bunch of nonsense. My sort of overall framework, I don't know if you can call it advice, but my assessment when it comes to this type of thing is to not do this, right? In order to heal, in order to move on from someone that has hurt you, you must move on. And the reason why I'm sort of motivated to talk about this now is I'm just now getting to a point where I've applied this well enough to people in my past where I've been thinking about certain people in my family, or that I'm not really family with, but they're related to me, but they've never treated me like family. I have been thinking about some of these people, and I realize I don't really care what happens to them anymore. I don't really care whether they have troubles or issues. I don't really care whether they get sick. I know that may be a mean thing to say, but it's actually a positive thing to get to that point with someone that doesn't have a positive role to play in your life to begin with. Because the people that you're supposed to care about, the people that you're supposed to really feel emotionally hurt if something bad happens to them, those are the people that are worth being in your life, not the people that don't deserve to be there. And so I don't really care what happens to them. Now, I don't want bad things to happen to them as well. That's another huge part of this. I'm not talking about I want them to get hurt. I want them to get sick. No, not at all. I just wouldn't feel that bad about it if it did happen. If my ex-girlfriend had an accident and was seriously injured, I don't want that to happen. I really don't. But would I really be emotionally affected by that? No, not really. I just go on with my day. I would feel kind of bad in a human sense, but beyond that, in terms of the personal relationship that we used to have together, that's all water under the bridge at this point, right? It affected me in ways. I remember the details about it, the good and the bad, but this person really let me down in a lot of ways, and I'm not going to get into that here. It wasn't anything horrifically bad, but just the kind of things that men experience today, right? Monkey branching, kind of taking advantage of you while you're there, but not really loving you the same way that a man tends to love a woman. I'm not going to get into the personal details, but, she did some things that were typically nasty, that's consistent with the darker aspects of female nature. And I don't want revenge. I don't want to contend with her crap. I'm not going to sit here and have conflict with her. I just don't care. And I've come to understand that a lot of these people from my past, I've finally reached a point where I've applied this information, this tactic, I guess, in such a way that I don't care about these people. I'm focused on the people that actually matter, and I'm focused on myself. Those are the people that I don't want to have bad things happen to. Other people, at a human level, I don't want bad things to happen to them, but I also really am not going to be emotionally affected by it. That's what I mean when I say I don't care. I'm not saying that, I'm just have no moral value for human life or well-being. I'm saying I don't really emotionally have any investment in this anymore. And I realized that actually means that I've healed from these toxic relationships and associations I've had with people in the past. I've actually healed from that and have gotten to a point where I'm truly over it. And I'm not saying there's never a scar with that in terms of damage that was done from being friends with someone too long, or continuing to go back to a negative situation with my ex, or continuing to have conflict with certain people that I'm related to that really never treated me like family. I'm not saying that there's no damage that was ever done from that, but the damage is healed. I've been affected by it, but I no longer care about those people in those situations. And the reason why I was able to get to that point, I just had this sort of epiphany, is that I put into practice the concept of basically getting these people out of my life successfully. I no longer have contact with them. They're not my friends. They're not my loved ones. I just don't care anymore. I just let go of it. And it doesn't happen overnight, right? That's another part of my point, is that you don't just say that with an ex that you just broke up with that actually meant something to you, or with a friend that you thought was your friend for years and then betrayed you or sold you out for their own personal gain or lied about you that seriously affected you in a negative way, you don't just say, well, I don't care anyway. That's not what I mean. I mean, I really genuinely don't care anymore, right? It hit me that a lot of these situations, they are whatever. Those people can do their own thing. In a way, I wish them the best, but in reality, if they don't get the best, that's kind of their problem. That's up to them and the people that they're associated with now. And between them and God, I guess you could say. That's not my issue anymore. I really don't care what happens to certain people in my past. But if I had continued to try to get those people to approve of me in some way, or fight with them, or deal with them and have this drama, I would never have been able to heal and get to this point, if that makes sense. And so I thought this was worth making a video about, because this is another one of those things that I think has to have a good deal of importance in life. I think this is the biggest mistake people make, because so often people that I see in everyday life don't get to this point. Again, they're fighting with their so-called friends. Women tend to do this with other women, of course, as well. They have these frenemy relationships. There is no such thing as a frenemy. If someone's not your friend, they're your freaking enemy in that situation, right? Get away from them. Don't be frenemies with them. End your association. That is the healthier choice from what I've experienced. And it can be powerful when you get to that point where you realize, oh, I'm pretty much healed from this. Whatever my ex does, she does, but I'm not involved in it. I didn't have kids with her. I didn't get married to her. And I'm not saying I was perfect in our relationship throughout our history, but it's water under the bridge. Most of what happened, in my view, was pretty much her fault. But so what, right? I don't have to deal with that. If she would ever try to message me again, I'm just going to ignore her or block her. I don't think that's going to happen now anyway. But other situations, as sort of a final point, may be a little bit more challenging or a lot more challenging if you do have kids with someone, for example, and you have to continue to deal with that person and co-parent. That makes it a lot more difficult. But still, mentally speaking, I think you can pretty much check out and say, you know what, I care about my child and how you treat my child matters, but as far as you as a person, especially if you cheated on me or you made up accusations against me and it wasn't an amicable breakup at all, which in most cases it's not when you break up with someone, if we're being honest, then I care about my kid and how you treat my kid, so I don't want you to fall over, but in terms of you personally, screw off, right? I don't care about you as a person anymore. I've checked out. It only matters in terms of how it affects my kids. That, to me, I think is probably the proper response there. When it comes to certain family members, you're probably going to have to deal with those family members if you still associate with other family members. And this applies to friendship circles as well. I'm going to continue to use the family example because I think it's more potent probably. But you may have loved ones in your family that you care deeply about that still see the other people that you're only related to, have never treated you like family. They still see those people as family. And you may have to respect that to some extent. You may have to realize that's the case. They're part of the family that you're part of. They just aren't really family to you, right? That's how I've learned to see this. And so these people, I'm sure that if they knew my cavalier, my sort of disinterested attitude toward them now, they would not appreciate that. And they'd probably try to create drama and say that I'm this bad person. But again, I really and just truly don't care, except in terms of how other family members see me that I do care about. So there are complicating factors. I'm not saying this is always an easy thing to pull off. And it takes years to get to a point where someone that you actually loved and cared about is someone that you really just don't care about anymore. It may take a really long time to get there. The sibling relationship, I never had a sibling, so I don't know exactly what that's like. But I also see brothers and sisters fighting each other all the time as adults. And then they say they love each other, but there's actually no evidence that they love each other. And maybe that's something special to the sibling relationship, but I really kind of am skeptical of that. I think these people are making the same mistake. If you have an adult sibling that you simply can't get along with and really doesn't do anything positive in your life, they're only there because they're your sibling, it makes sense to me to cut ties with that person as well, along with any other family member. The only thing, again, that might be a little bit of an exception to that is the parent-child relationship, depending on the nature of your situation. But even then, you may decide to cut ties, at least for a period of time, at least until that person is actually going to treat you with some respect or whatnot. But in every other case, you just get these people out of your life if they are a toxic influence. You don't sit here and continue to fight with them. You don't sit here and try to make amends. When you reach the conclusion, when you put it together and realize, oh, okay, this person is not someone that I even want to deal with anymore, the proper thing to do, the appropriate thing to do is to just move on in whatever form or fashion you can. Doesn't matter what other people think about it. If other people decide, well, I don't like you, Dan, because you won't be friends with such and such, screw them too. That's the appropriate response. You can add them to the list. You can try to work things out with them. Again, you can decide when it gets to a point if there's someone else that isn't worth being in your life anymore. But ultimately, you have the power to kick them out as well. So when it comes full circle, when you realize years later that you ended that conflict by no longer engaging with that person anymore, and then you realize, oh, if I hadn't done that, if I hadn't personally decided to end that conflict, I could still be dealing with this person's shit. Oh, look, they got in trouble with the law because they used drugs. Or, oh, look, they're creating drama with somebody else. That could have been me if I had been dumb enough to continue to associate with this person. But it's not me because I decided I was done with it years ago. That is a really liberating feeling. It's something that really is powerful. And I've just now gotten to a point where I've started to experience that with people, right? I don't care what certain people who are related to me are doing. That's their issue. I don't care about my ex or certain former friends anymore. At a human level, I don't necessarily hope bad things happen to them, but if they do, that's sad, but it's kind of not my problem either. And to me, even though that sounds harsh, it sounds cold, that's the better way of seeing negative people that used to be part of your life. That's kind of the consequence, that's the payment for whatever negative role they played, to be honest. That's on them. If they didn't want to treat you like family when you were growing up, and now they wonder why it is that you don't want to talk to them, that's kind of their problem. I've let go of that as well. So I would strongly suggest that you not fall into the trap of thinking that certain people have to be in your life when they have no positive role to play. You can give people as much leeway as you think is appropriate. You can set the bar high or low as far as what you're willing to put up with. If someone is a close family member, maybe you put up with quite a bit more. Maybe you don't. Or someone that you want to work out a friendship with or a relationship with, you can put as much effort into that as you want. But when you've decided, when you've concluded that that person really doesn't have a positive role to play overall in your life, you wash your hands of it as quickly as you can. You get that person out of your life as much as you can. You move on. You let that person do what they want to do. You don't have conflict anymore. You don't try to get them to like you or make amends either. You just don't deal with that person as much as you can possibly avoid them. And you mentally just stop caring. Or you're going to have these emotions, right? It's not going to be something, again, to finish this video up, that happens overnight. You're not going to all of a sudden wake up one day and be like, oh, I went from yesterday really caring about this person to today not caring at all. Emotionally, it's not going to work like that. But if you are going to heal, you have to do that as soon as possible in terms of getting that person out of your life. You can acknowledge that you're not happy about the situation, but realize that the longer you take to get to that point where you completely remove that person from what you do in life, from your daily existence, the sooner you get to that point, from what I've experienced anyway, the sooner you can actually get to a point later where you've healed, where you no longer give a crap about what that person's doing anymore. That person is basically like a stranger to you at that point. And any problems they want to create for themselves or others, you're no longer a part of. Don't make the mistake of continuing to have conflict unnecessarily with people for years that don't have a positive role to play in your life. Get them out of your life as quickly as you can. Don't have conflict with them. Don't try to make amends. Once you've reached that point where you realize there's no positive role for that person to play, you don't continue to go back to the same situation. You kick them out. You move on. The sooner that you can do that, the quicker that you can heal. And a lot of people would be better off, I believe, if they would figure that out and make that kind of decision as soon as they possibly can, once they realize that that other person doesn't have an actual positive role to play in their life.